I've been thinking about this episode time after time, learning about people's relatability towards Squidward, and the fact that I never talked about this episode in my top 25 raw Spongebob episodes that I did 7 years ago. But to tell you the truth, with this being the first video of 2024 for me, I need to be really truthfully honest that after rewatching this episode when it's almost 12 years old, which is surprisingly considering of how the post-movie era really felt like the old school era of what we thought about SpongeBob, and this was also around the time where SpongeBob just isn't in HD full time. 2012 really feels like the year when Nickelodeon just hasn't been the same, despite with a few good things, but they're not similar to what they did with the other Nicktoons in the 2000s. Are You Happy Now is the episode where Squidward doesn't have a happy memory, and SpongeBob needs to do anything to help him out. The only difference is that he's actually doing the happy moments the right way, rather than being a nudist towards Squidward. But no matter how much he tries, it ends up falling flat because the world of SpongeBob hates Squidward and pushes him down. For the synopsis, aside from the ending that I'm gonna get to later, that's really all there is. And to tell you the truth, when I see videos when it comes to people's positive feedback when it comes to what the episode is trying to do by making SpongeBob a lot more likable than being a nudist, while having the relatability of Squidward while he doesn't have a happy memory, you also forgot to realize that the happy memories that Squidward had was also in the post-movie era and in Bang Geeks, which is one of the best episodes from SpongeBob. But regardless, there's no continuity whatsoever from SpongeBob, which for me personally, I would consider it as a problem, but I've already described that when I did my Camp Koa video when I compared it to We Baby Bills. But getting back to the episode, after watching critiques, good and bad, when it comes to this episode, mainly from bad, my point of view of this is that this would have been better off if it happened in the golden age of SpongeBob, mainly seasons 1 through 3. And to tell you the truth, the post-movie era, which has more seasons, while the new era, well not really new era, but the third era of SpongeBob is getting more seasons and episodes that is close to the post-movie era, Nickelodeon refuses to remain consistency once the creator leaves or a scandal that happens. But let me just be perfectly honest with you, after watching this episode, I really felt like it would have been much more better if it happened in seasons 1 through 3, and if it happened before Bang Geeks. I'm pretty sure that it would have had an interesting idea by creating the format of this episode and Bang Geeks together, but keep in mind, I have to admit that Bang Geeks is one of the best episodes, and leaving well enough alone is good enough for the structure of that episode. Because the structure of this episode just goes to show that they can't be able to try, and whether they just retcon or just allow the universe of SpongeBob, mainly the logic of itself, work out for their favors. Those are a lot of shortcuts, and it really shows that the post-movie era episodes really have a lot of shortcuts and lazy writing behind them. But after a decade of critiquing the bad episodes from other users that I'm familiar with that really made SpongeBob a difficult show to sit through, I'm starting to convince that this episode, mainly Squidward's character, is just difficult for me to find any relatability out of, because the problem on to why I don't relate to Squidward whatsoever is because when the writing of the episode is making him do the stuff that really makes it difficult for me to find any relatability out of, and this is a year before Little book came out. The biggest problem of me finding relatability from Squidward is because, to tell you the truth, it doesn't change the fact that he's still egotistical, and even though in this episode he isn't egotistical, it's difficult to see how the relatability of him is coming from. Well, the majority of the episode is just characters just pushing him down and just having bad things happening to Squidward, and whenever SpongeBob is just trying to help, Squidward said to him towards the end that he doesn't want a happy memory. You know, the fact that it got to the point where he doesn't want a happy memory and you were supposed to find relatability from the guy just makes it a lot more confusing for me to understand where the relatability is coming from when it comes to the state that Squidward is in this episode. When SpongeBob isn't at his worst in this episode, where he's actually helping out Squidward, it really feels like that he's helping him out, and even though that his personality isn't the same as he was in the golden age of SpongeBob, I can still see that he's at least attempting to make things right with the people all around him. Now, the fact that this post-movie era is trying a lot more harder to have SpongeBob's point of view of Squidward being mainly something that he is hiding, even though that he's not hiding anything from SpongeBob, despite the fact that he did that in the Golden Age, it doesn't change the fact that when there are times where SpongeBob and Squidward are communicating with each other, there's also the aspect where the two aren't communicating when SpongeBob is annoying him while Squidward is being mean to SpongeBob. And with the relatability from Squidward, when it comes to him being depressed for the next 2 weeks, I'm sorry, but it tries way too hard. Even when it's trying to be dark, well, it has a suicide joke. I just don't even understand how it's difficult for me to find any relatability from Squidward when the writing and structure of the episode just doesn't work. When an episode, especially from SpongeBob, tries to handle serious topics like depression and suicide, you need to understand that this show also attempts on a person going suicide mainly from one-course meal, and Plankton was attempting to go suicide. And even though that this episode somewhat did it better, it doesn't change the fact that whenever I see Squidward in this and how depressed he is the fact that whenever he does something, it just doesn't work out for him. But that's mainly the fact that his ego and his selfishness just gets the better of him. Like, the world building of SpongeBob, I do not like it. I really prefer other world buildings from other cartoons that are much less toxic and not over the top mean-spirited. Now, I'm fully remembering on the mean-spirited nature from seasons 1 through 3, since it does have mean-spirited moments. However, when it comes to the post-movie era, it really feels like that they just went too far and not thinking of how it really makes the characters difficult to find any relatability out of, especially when in some of the episodes where there's no mean-spirited moments, it's not enough to make up for the other mean-spirited moments from the worst episodes. And to tell you the truth, whenever I see SpongeBob and Squidward in this who are carrying the entire episode, it really feels like that they just don't know what to do, considering that this is mainly a Squidward torture episode, but not in the same ways as the other Squidward torture episodes that I've seen in the past. Because as far as I'm concerned, when SpongeBob isn't annoying Squidward, the only thing I can think of is, what is the point in all of this, even from a popular cartoon? Like, when this episode came out, when I watched it for the first time, I didn't mind it. In fact, I completely forgot what it's trying to do. I mostly remember the other bad episodes. But the way I see it, it really feels like everything that happens doesn't really matter at the end, since that this is still a SpongeBob episode at the end of the day, and nothing really matters. Let me just say this right now, that the ending just further indicates onto why I do not find any relatability from Squidward, all the while what he does when it came to the surprise party that SpongeBob has constructed. You see, the surprise party that SpongeBob constructed is that he couldn't be able to invite anyone who was busy or sick, so he made paper maches of himself, which only angers Squidward, allowing out that he doesn't want a happy memory, which leads to him breaking the paper maches of SpongeBob's. This is where my comment of SpongeBob and Squidward not communicating with each other comes in full effect, because I really did not like this ending even when I watched it for the first time. And as far as I'm concerned, when Squidward's happiest memory is just to get rid of SpongeBob, which is similar to what Mrs. Puff did in Demolition Doofus that came out months after this episode, and when SpongeBob is okay with it because he just is too oblivious, then that is where I literally draw the line. Because you wanna know why I do not relate to Squidward is because when they instantly just do stuff like this and they expect you to run with it. And the sad thing is that they did the deed correctly, considering that people during that time couldn't stand SpongeBob's character. The only difference is that it doesn't make this episode any better after almost 12 years. This episode really sums up a lot onto why the post-movie era of episodes really killed any interest I have of the SpongeBob franchise. Because whenever I try to find the relatability from Squidward, and when he does stuff like this, even though that what SpongeBob stated that he couldn't be able to find anyone who was busy or sick, which is the point onto why they've been aspent or whatever, and when he just does stuff like this and it's mainly his happiest moment, I've seen Squidward's point of view on SpongeBob multiple times, that what Mr. Ento said in his Whatever Happened to SpongeBob video, despite being outdated, well, Squidward not liking SpongeBob is not a joke. He's still, that compliment or that statement is actually the only thing that ages well over time. Because when SpongeBob isn't at his worst, he's actually something that can make the episode really good, and to tell you the truth, what he did towards the end wasn't even that bad. And as far as I'm concerned, him making the paper maches, it really feels like that he just wants to have people see Squidward as the only person that can actually look up to. But since I stated that earlier, that SpongeBob is the only character that actually sees the good in Squidward, but not for the right reasons, and this also leads to SpongeBob just being oblivious, it just makes these characters difficult to relate to and find any likability when they're not communicating with each other, and when SpongeBob is communicating Squidward's hatred towards him. I wouldn't even be in SpongeBob's position. Like, if that ever happened to me when I was trying to do something nice, I would literally give the person a piece of my mind and try to wake him up in the reality that is right in front of him. And with how Squidward is always enraged nearly every single time when it centers around SpongeBob or with Patrick, then it's getting old. Like, it's really becoming repetitive, that it's becoming a lot more annoying every time I go back to watching these episodes. Because as far as I'm concerned, if he doesn't see what I'm reacting right in front of him when I witness all this stuff and he just goes along with it, then to tell you the truth, he deserves to be unhappy. And as far as I'm concerned, the relatability that I have for him is pretty much gone if I'm mostly new to him, or him being new to me. This episode doesn't even bother to attempt to make some of these characters really likable when they're being portrayed differently in the final minutes of the episodes, which really makes it difficult for me to understand where Squidward was coming from. And when SpongeBob's obliviousness comes into play, it just makes me thankful that I didn't include this rather than expressing it way more earlier. Because if I did talk about this episode years ago, or including it in my top 25 Lost SpongeBob episodes, when it comes to honorable mentions, when it comes to an alternative, then I'm pretty sure I would have taken this episode a little too seriously when it comes to Squidward's rage and the ending of the episode. I wouldn't even be thinking about the suicide or dark elements from this episode at all. Every time that this show is mainly getting better when it comes to relatability and taking the realism to a level that people will probably see the nature of SpongeBob, then there's a huge reason onto why there are multiple ex-SpongeBob fans, and I'm still one of them. Because as far as I'm concerned, if I ever think about this episode and everything that I stated in this review, it would just make me thankful that I'm no longer looking into this show. Like, I understand that there are good things in the newest seasons. I understand that. And when it comes to how Nickelodeon is handling SpongeBob despite making it overexposed, it really feels like that they're at least trying to make SpongeBob relevant despite on making multiple missteps, mainly the Camp Coral spinoff. But less said about the spinoffs, the better. So yeah, this episode, while not one of the worst SpongeBob episodes, but at the same time, I really felt like that this episode would have been better off if it didn't happen. Because as far as I'm concerned, every time I try to look at what people's perspective towards this episode are when it comes to civilized discussions, it's just not enough for me to see the positivity of what this episode is trying to do, or the execution is just bringing it down. The only way I'm ever going to find relatability of Squidward is if I was in everyone else's shoes in the real world where they can find relatability from Squidward, except being selfish and egotistical. But the thing is, I'm not those types of people, which is why that looking at Squidward in this episode, it only made things worse. And to tell you the truth, the themes in this episode doesn't make up for it, knowing full well that I'm not into those types of themes when it comes to SpongeBob characters. I'm giving this episode a 2.25 out of 10.